A yellow blindfold flutters in the wind. Snow swirls like ash across the empty logging road, and at the edge of the forest, a blind German shepherd pauses. He cannot see. But someone, is calling. Deeper in the trees, a little girl hides beneath fallen branches, too afraid to cry, too tired to run. Her dress is torn, her hands are red with cold, and clutched to her chest is a sketchbook soaked with melted snow. Its pages her only voice. She was told to stay quiet, to never open the door, but the door was broken. And now, so is she. Most would have passed the trail without noticing the broken twigs or the shape in the snow. But this dog, this blind guardian, was not trained to pass by pain. He turns, he growls. And from that single sound, everything will change. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Comment your country below. Let's see how far one act of faith can travel. Edgepine. Maine was the kind of town where winter always arrived a little too early and stayed a little too long. By late November, the trees stood bare as bone, and the wind tore through the pines like glass. Snow fell sideways under a sky the color of pewter. On nights like this, the streets of Edgepine were abandoned, the lights dim behind shuttered windows, and only the sound of the storm dared to speak. At the edge of the forest, nestled where the trees thickened into wilderness, stood a weather-worn cabin. It belonged to Harper Lane, a woman who had once been known across county lines as a fierce advocate for at-risk youth, until she wasn't. Harper was 34, tall with broad shoulders that had carried more than their fair share of weight. Her auburn hair, once always tied in a professional bun, now hung loosely around a face framed by faint lines of grief and distance. Her eyes were a cold green, sharp when she needed them to be, but tired more often than not. She had left her job 2 years ago after a failed child protection case, one that still visited her in dreams, and since then, she'd made her life as quiet as possible. A little garden, a lot of wood to chop, no visitors, no responsibilities, and no children, except for Sonny. Sonny was a 5-year-old German shepherd, tall and sturdy, with a thick coat of sable and gold that dulled in the winter light. He wore a yellow blindfold tied carefully behind his ears. Both eyes were clouded white, the result of shrapnel damage sustained during his time as a military therapy dog. But blindness hadn't dulled him, it had refined him. Sonny moved with eerie intuition, never bumping into a wall, always aware of who entered a room before they said a word. He was Harper's shadow, her one remaining tether to purpose. That night, the wind howled like it had something to prove, rattling the old windows as Harper tightened her parka and stepped onto the porch. She adjusted Sonny's vest and clicked the metal clasp of his leash, though she rarely needed it. Together, they moved into the woods, their usual night walk, half therapy, half escape. Snow crunched underfoot, branches creaked overhead. Sonny stayed close at her heel, ears flicking, nose raised slightly. Harper liked the silence. It didn't demand conversation, didn't judge the distance she kept from town, from people. But halfway through their loop near the northern path, Sonny stopped. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just froze, his head turning ever so slightly toward a copse of birch trees up ahead. Harper's breath misted in the air. "What is it?" Sonny moved forward, slow but steady. Harper followed, boots crunching through the crust of snow, her flashlight trembling as she raised it. And then she saw her. A little girl, no more than 6, sat alone on a moss-covered bench almost buried in snow. She wore no coat, just a thin pink dress now stiff with ice. Her knees were drawn up to her chest, arms wrapped, tightly around a tattered blue backpack. Her lips were cracked, her cheeks raw from windburn. But she didn't cry, she just stared forward, into nothing. Harper dropped to one knee in front of her. "Hey, sweetheart." The girl blinked slowly, not startled, just hollow. "My name's Harper. You're safe now, okay?" The child didn't speak. Her fingers gripped the backpack like it was part of her body. Harper reached into her coat, pulled out her emergency blanket, and wrapped it around the girl's shoulders. Sonny pressed close on the other side, his body blocking the wind. "What's your name?" Harper asked softly. A long silence passed. Then, just above a whisper, the girl said, "They said it was my fault." Harper's stomach turned. "What was, honey?" But the child shook her head, clutched the bag tighter, and whispered again, "It was my fault. I shouldn't have told." Harper lifted the girl gently. She was light. Far too light. Maybe 30 pounds. The girl didn't resist. She just tucked her face against Harper's collarbone, like she was used to being carried by strangers and not being asked why. Back at the cabin, the fire was already burning. Harper wrapped the girl in layers of flannel, laid her on the couch, and prepared warm broth. Sonny curled near the fireplace but never stopped facing her, his ears twitching at every sound she made. An hour later, the girl had eaten half a bowl and now lay asleep, still holding the blue bag. Harper hadn't tried to open it, not yet. Something about the way the child held it made it sacred. As Harper tucked another blanket over her, the door creaked open. Logan Lane entered, shaking snow from his boots. 17, lean and sharp-edged, Logan had the restless energy of a teenager who had grown up too fast. His hair was the same auburn as Harper's, but messier, and his eyes were always just a little too angry. After their mother's death, Harper had taken him in, though their relationship had been strained ever since. He froze when he saw the girl. "You brought home a kid?" he said, dropping his duffel. "Seriously?" "She was alone in the woods, Logan," Harper said evenly. "So, maybe there's a reason for that. You ever think about that?" Sonny stood then silently, his blindfolded gaze fixed in Logan's direction. Logan scowled. "I'm just saying," he muttered, peeling off his coat. "You don't even know who she is." "Number. But I know what she isn't," Harper replied, her voice low. "Safe." Logan glanced at the sleeping girl again. His jaw tightened. Then he turned and walked toward his room without another word. Harper sat down beside Sonny and ran her hand along his back. "We've done this before, haven't we?" she whispered. Sonny didn't wag his tail. He just leaned into her palm and let out a slow, steady breath. Outside, the snow fell heavier. But inside the cabin, something like warmth had returned. Not comfort, not peace, but a flicker of something close. The morning light in Edge Pine was a gray wash of sky and frost. Snow still clung to the branches like a second skin, and the air smelled of pine and smoke. Inside the cabin, the wood stove pulsed with heat, filling the small home with the crackle of fire and a faint scent of pine resin. Harper Lane stood at the kitchen counter, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee. She hadn't slept. Not really. She had stayed in the armchair near the couch, where the little girl now lay, curled beneath 3 layers of flannel blankets. Daisy had not stirred once in the night, except to whimper and grip the blue backpack tighter. Sonny, the blind German shepherd with the yellow blindfold, had taken his post near the front door. He hadn't moved either, ears tilted forward, nose twitching at every sound beyond the walls. Whenever the wind howled or something shifted outside, like falling snow from a branch or the rustling of pine, he let out a soft growl, low and warning. Harper's eyes shifted to the backpack. She had debated opening it. It felt like violating something sacred. But this morning, with the fire warm and Daisy still asleep, she knelt beside the couch, careful not to startle her, and gently tugged on the frayed zipper. The bag was worn canvas, the color of faded denim, with a sewn patch that once said, "Hello, sunshine," in peeling yellow letters. Inside were only a few things: a pair of socks, an empty juice box, a small plastic pony missing one leg, and, folded neatly at the bottom, a crumpled sheet of paper. Harper pulled it out. It was a child's drawing, done in thick black crayon. A house stood crooked on a hill, shaded heavily, almost angrily. Next to it, a stick figure woman with long black hair loomed beside what looked like a truck, black as the house, and with no license plate. In the corner, a tiny figure sat beside a tree. Harper stared at it for a long moment before folding it back and tucking it inside the bag. As she did, Daisy stirred, her eyes fluttering open. The girl blinked up at Harper, confused, then sat up quickly and clutched the bag. "Where is it?" she whispered. "It's right here, sweetie," Harper said gently, placing the backpack in her lap. Daisy didn't respond, just hugged the bag and pulled the blanket up to her chin. "You hungry?" Harper asked. Daisy hesitated, then gave a small nod. As Harper stood, the back door opened. Logan stepped in, rubbing his gloved hands together. His cheeks were pink from the cold. His teenage frame was wrapped in a dark hoodie and worn jeans that had seen better days. He looked at the girl and then at Harper. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. Harper followed him into the small hallway. "She talks now?" he said quietly. "She said one sentence," Harper replied, still holding that bag like it's her heart. Logan glanced back toward the couch. "She was talking last night, in her sleep." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Kept saying something, over and over." He swallowed. "Mom said don't open the door, like a warning, like she saw something." Harper folded her arms. "She's scared." "Yeah, and maybe with a good reason," Logan said, his voice low. "What if someone's looking for her, someone who shouldn't find her?" Before Harper could reply, a knock came at the front door. Sonny growled instantly and stepped forward, ears alert. Harper opened the door cautiously. Standing outside was a tall man in uniform, his breath fogging in the cold. Officer Paul Jennings, mid-40s with a barrel chest, close-cropped salt and pepper hair, and the kind of face that had seen too many quiet tragedies. "Morning," he said, his voice gravelly. "Paul," Harper said, "didn't expect visitors." "I heard about the footprints in the North Woods," he said, stepping in. "One of the hikers saw you carrying someone last night. Figured I'd check." Paul removed his gloves and warmed his hands near the stove. He looked around the cabin, then spotted Daisy. "Is she all right?" "She's safe," Harper replied. Paul glanced at Sonny, then back at Harper. "There's been a report. Another kid gone, 2 towns over. No one said anything official, but this is the 4th case in less than 3 weeks. All kids, all with messy stories." Harper felt her stomach drop. "Where's the last place she was seen?" she asked. "A shelter near Route 12. Said her mom left her there, but the records are thin." Paul hesitated. "You think she saw something?" Harper nodded slightly. "She's holding on to something, not just fear. Details." Paul leaned in slightly. "If you learn anything, you'll let me know, right?" "I will," Harper said. He paused, then looked toward the window. "Be careful, Harper. Something's not right this season." When he left, Logan sat back down in the corner chair and watched as Harper brought a bowl of oatmeal to Daisy. The girl sat quietly, spooning one bite at a time, still holding the backpack with one hand. "Did you draw that picture?" Harper asked gently, kneeling beside her again. Daisy stopped eating. She looked down at the spoon. "Do you know the woman with long hair?" Harper asked. Daisy nodded. "Is she your mom?" Daisy shook her head. "Is she still out there?" Daisy's hands trembled slightly. Sonny let out a quiet huff and moved closer, laying down with his head resting near Daisy's foot. She looked at him, then slowly reached out her hand and touched his fur. That night, Harper lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Logan had barely spoken a word since dinner. He sat at the window most of the evening, staring into the trees as if expecting something or someone to emerge. In the living room, Sonny stood by the door again. Every time Harper stepped near the kitchen sink or adjusted a chair, the dog tensed, especially when she moved. The metal kettle or when Logan opened a drawer. Every sound of clinking metal made Sonny turn his head sharply, body stiff, breath shallow, as if he were hearing ghosts. Harper made a mental note: metal sounds, heavy trucks, and a picture drawn in angry lines. Outside, the snow continued to fall, silent and endless. The snow had not stopped in 3 days. It blanketed Edge Pine in a silence so thick it felt unnatural, like the world was holding its breath. The pines surrounding Harper Lane's cabin stood like sentinels, their boughs heavy with white, and the path into the forest had nearly disappeared. Inside the cabin, the heat of the wood stove fought back the chill. Daisy sat cross-legged near the hearth, her back pressed against the couch, the blue backpack still within arm's reach. She was drawing again, this time with colored pencils Harper had found in an old desk drawer. The lines on the paper were jagged, uncertain. Her hands trembled now and then, but she stayed focused, as if the pictures helped her keep the fear away. Harper sat nearby, watching her closely. She had not asked questions again. Not yet. Trust, she knew, was built in increments. Sonny lay sprawled near the front door, blindfold in place, ears still. His breathing was slow, but Harper noticed how his body tensed every time Daisy pressed too hard, with a pencil or a floorboard creaked under Logan's restless pacing upstairs. Logan had been up since dawn. The 17-year-old had taken to watching the woods from the second-floor window, his eyes shadowed by something deeper than fatigue. He hadn't told Harper why he stayed up, or what he thought he was looking for, but she knew. He'd seen something. It was nearly noon when Harper finally unfolded the crayon drawing again, this time spreading it across the dining table beneath the lamp. The crude image of the black truck still stood out like a wound on the page. She stared at it for a long time. Then she rose and pulled on her coat. "Sonny," she said softly. The shepherd lifted his head. "We're going for a walk." Daisy looked up, alarm flashing in her eyes. "I'll be back," Harper said gently. "You'll be safe here. Logan's upstairs." The girl didn't speak, but Harper saw her tiny fingers curl tighter around the straps of the backpack. Outside, the cold bit hard. The wind had dropped but left behind an eerie stillness, broken only by the crunch of Harper's boots and Sonny's steady breath beside her. No leash was needed. Sonny stayed close, turning his head with each sound, each bird call, each distant snap of frost. They walked east, deeper into the forest. The path was nearly erased, but Sonny led without hesitation, as if some unseen instinct guided him. Harper followed, one hand on her flashlight, the other tucked inside her coat. 20 minutes in, Sonny stopped. He lifted his head, sniffed the air. Then, slowly, he turned left, off the path, and into the deeper woods. Harper hesitated. "What is it, boy?" Sonny took a few careful steps forward and paused again, turning his head as if to beckon her. She followed. They came to a small clearing, half hidden between leaning birches. There, the snow was packed strangely smooth, unnaturally flattened. Harper crouched down and brushed away the top layer with her gloves. What emerged made her blood run cold. Tire tracks, deep, wide, and fresh enough that some of the snow at the edges was still loose. A vehicle had been here recently. Beside the tracks, she found something else. A red ribbon, half buried, and next to it, a broken bracelet, child-sized, with faded plastic beads. Harper stood slowly, scanning the woods. Her breath came out in a long cloud. She didn't see anyone, but she felt it. Someone had been here, watching, or worse, waiting. Sonny let out a soft growl. Back at the cabin, Logan was seated on the floor in front of the back window, his gaze fixed outside. He held a pair of binoculars, old and cracked, but functional. His hoodie was pulled over his head, and his fingers tapped anxiously against his leg. He'd seen movement earlier. Not much. Just a shape. A blur between the trees, too tall to be a deer, too quiet to be a hiker. He didn't tell Harper yet. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he didn't want to worry her. Maybe he wanted to prove something, to her, or to himself. He heard a sound behind him and turned. Daisy? She stood barefoot on the wooden floorboards, still in the oversized flannel shirt Harper had given her. Her eyes were glazed. She wasn't really awake. She stepped forward slowly, murmuring under her breath. "No. Mommy said don't open the door." Logan stood, unsure of what to do. She kept walking, right past him, and pressed her small hands to the window pane. "He said we'd just go see the stars," she whispered. "Said I wouldn't have to be scared." Logan moved to her side. "Daisy?" The girl blinked, confused, then looked up at him. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but her shoulders shook. He hesitated, then reached down and wrapped a blanket around her. "Come on," he said. "Let's go sit." Harper returned shortly after, boots caked with snow. Her cheeks were red with wind, her jaw clenched. Logan met her at the door. "She sleepwalks," he said. "Talks in her sleep." "I know," Harper said. "She remembers more than she's saying." She told him about the clearing, the tracks, the bracelet. "That truck on the drawing," she added. "It was there." Logan didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "So someone's still out there." Harper nodded. "And they know this forest." That evening, Officer Jennings returned. He parked his cruiser just outside the gate, then walked the rest of the way to the cabin. His boots left deep impressions in the snow, and he knocked with the kind of weight that said he wasn't just here for tea. Harper let him in. Jennings removed his cap. "We got a problem," he said. Another kid gone. Name's Micah. 7. Foster home out near Pine Bridge. Harper's stomach sank. They think he ran? No, Jennings said. Caretaker said he was taken, window forced, snow prints leading, into the woods, same tire pattern you described. Harper looked at him. So, it's a pattern. It's a ring, Jennings muttered, and it's moving closer. Sonny growled low from the corner. Jennings turned to the dog. Smart animal, he said. He knows, Harper replied. Jennings exhaled and rubbed his jaw. Look, I want to set up a check-in system. You see anything at all, call me direct. Understood. As he left, Daisy watched from the stairs, her arms wrapped tight around the backpack. When Harper approached her, she didn't flinch. I remember his voice, Daisy whispered. It sounded like honey and glass. Harper crouched down, heart pounding. Who, sweetie? The man who said I had to go. The one who knew my name. The air was sharper than usual that morning, crisp with the promise of more snow. Frost clung to every pine needle and window pane in Edge Pine like a warning etched in glass. Harper Lane stood by the cabin's back porch, her gloved fingers tightening around a thermos. Her breath misted as she scanned the tree line, heart pounding, not from the cold, but from the memory of Daisy's voice the night before. He knew my name? Logan stepped outside beside her, wearing a heavy black jacket over his hoodie, binoculars slung around his shoulder. His movements were less restless now, more deliberate. The look in his eyes had changed, no longer just guarded, but purposeful. Inside the cabin, Daisy was curled up on the couch beneath Sonny's watchful presence. The blind German shepherd lay at the foot of the couch, his yellow blindfold as much a badge of resilience as it was necessity. Though blind, Sonny's ears flicked at every sound, his nose twitching toward the door with quiet anticipation. Harper turned as a familiar engine sound crunched through the snow. A few seconds later, Officer Paul Jennings arrived, his cruiser stopping short of the porch. He stepped out, looking heavier than usual in his navy parka. His weathered face was pinched from lack of sleep. We got something, he said without preamble. Harper and Logan followed him inside, where he laid out a laminated copy of an old map of the forest grid on the kitchen table. Jennings tapped the northwest quadrant. We cross-referenced the tire tracks and found that same tread pattern leading to an unregistered hunting cabin. No utilities, no deed records, and it doesn't appear on any updated GPS logs. Someone wants to keep it hidden, Harper muttered. Jennings nodded grimly. It matches the drawing Daisy made. Down to the fork in the road she scrawled near the corner of the woods. She didn't draw that by accident. Harper looked toward Sonny, who had stood and begun circling the table slowly, as if he too understood what was coming. We're going, she said, grabbing her coat. You, me, Logan, and Sonny. Jennings raised a brow. You sure the dog can handle? He'll lead us better than a flashlight, she said. He's already done it once. The forest swallowed sound as they moved deeper in, trudging through knee-deep snow in single file. Logan kept watch from the rear, his gaze flickering constantly behind them. He held a metal flashlight in one hand and a tire iron in the other. Gone was the sarcasm and teenaged edge. This Logan moved like someone ready to face something. Officer Jennings led with cautious military precision. He had once served in the Coast Guard search and rescue, a history written in the taut set of his shoulders and the slow, deliberate steps he took through the terrain. Sonny moved ahead, slightly off-center from the path, following a scent trail none of them could see. His pace slowed only near a fallen tree before he picked up again, moving faster, tail rigid, nose to the ground. After 45 minutes of weaving through thick brush and unmarked trails, the trees gave way to a small clearing, and there it stood, a one-story hunting cabin, the wood siding weathered and darkened with mold. The windows were boarded from the inside, no smoke, no sound. Jennings raised a fist. They froze. Harper whispered, Sonny? The dog took 3 slow steps forward, then turned sharply right, toward the backside of the cabin. They followed him, crouching low through snow-covered underbrush until they reached a boarded-over back entrance. A chain lock hung from a thick bolt, rusted but intact. But beneath the snow, Logan noticed a sliver of dark space, just enough to suggest someone had been in and out. Jennings drew a folding pry bar from his bag. It only took 2 grunts and a heavy creak to pop the door open. Inside, darkness swallowed them. The smell hit first. Old sweat, damp wood, and something sharper, metallic. The beam from Harper's flashlight cut through the dark. The room was small, lined with old cots and cracked wooden crates. On a splintering table in the corner lay scattered papers, fake ID cards, child intake forms, and a burner phone with a cracked screen. Jennings swore under his breath. Harper stepped to the center of the room. "There's a door," she said, pointing toward the far side. It was partially hidden by an old wool curtain. Sonny moved first, head lowered. He sniffed the air and growled, low, guttural. Then, without hesitation, he nudged the curtain aside with his snout and nosed the doorknob. Harper moved up and twisted the knob. Locked, but Logan had already stepped beside her, pulling a rusted keyring from the table they had just searched. "Try this." The third key clicked. The door swung inward, revealing a narrow hallway, barely wide enough for one person, with a second door at the end. Harper moved forward, her heart thundering. From behind that door came a muffled sound, a breath, a whimper. Harper pressed her ear to the wood. "Hello?" she whispered. Silence. "Are you hurt?" Then a knock. Faint. Once. Jennings pushed past gently and used his shoulder to force the door open. Inside, a teenage girl sat huddled in the corner of a windowless room, wrapped in a dirty blanket. Her long blonde hair was tangled and matted. Her face was pale but alert. Harper crouched down. "It's okay, you're safe." The girl blinked. "Are you real?" Logan moved beside her. "What's your name?" "Maddie," she said, her voice hoarse. "Maddie Lynn." Jennings's jaw tightened. "She's been on our missing persons list since July." Harper wrapped the girl in her spare coat. Maddie clung to her like a ghost, trying to come back to life. They brought her out carefully, Sonny guiding them back the way they came. Snow fell again as they moved through the trees, gentle now, but steady. Back at the cabin, Daisy saw Maddie and ran to her without a word. The two girls clung to each other, and though neither spoke, it was clear they understood. Survivors shared language without words. Logan stood to the side, watching the exchange. Later that night, after Jennings had made his report and left with Maddie to the clinic, Harper found Logan on the porch. He didn't say anything at first, just looked out at the woods. "You did good today," she said. He gave a small nod. "Didn't think I could, help. You protected someone." Logan looked at her, eyes glassy with something almost like peace. "Yeah," he said. "I did." The courthouse in Pine Bridge was an old stone building that looked as if it had weathered every storm Maine could throw at it. Snow curled at its windowsills like lace, and inside, the wood-paneled courtroom creaked under the weight of decades of justice and silence. Daisy sat in the witness box, her legs barely reaching the floor. She wore a soft navy dress with white buttons, and her light brown hair was pulled into a neat braid. She looked smaller than ever beneath the high ceiling and heavy stairs, but beside her sat Sonny, unmoving, his large frame pressed protectively against the floor at her feet. His yellow blindfold was clean and freshly tied, and a small red ribbon clipped to his vest fluttered slightly when he shifted his weight. The courtroom was packed. Parents of missing children, reporters, and people who had followed the case all came to see the face of the man accused, Wade Monroe. Wade sat at the defense table in a wrinkled gray suit, his face pale, jaw tight. He was in his mid-50s, tall but slumped, with thinning dark hair and eyes that scanned the room like a man already looking for an escape. His public defender, a sharp-faced woman named Marla Rivers, whispered something into his ear, but he didn't respond. He just stared at Daisy. Judge Evelyn Carver presided, an older woman with deep crow's feet, silver hair in a bun, and a voice like dry leaves. She had once been a child rights attorney before taking the bench, and her eyes softened only slightly when she looked toward Daisy. "Ms. Daisy," she said gently, "are you ready?" Daisy glanced at Harper, who sat just behind her, hands folded tightly in her lap. Then at Sonny, whose calm breathing seemed to steady her own. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. "What would you like to tell the court?" Daisy gripped the edge of the wooden box, knuckles white. "The man in the gray coat came to our house. Mama wasn't there. He said he knew her, that she told him I could come." She paused. "But Mama never said that." "And then?" "He had a van, no windows in the back. He said we were going to see stars in the forest. Her voice shook slightly, but she kept going. He made me sit quiet, no noise. He said it was my fault if I got scared. Wade flinched. Behind him, a woman gasped quietly. Daisy reached down and gently placed her hand on Sonny's back. The dog didn't move, but his tail thumped once, just enough to let her know he was still there. When I ran, she said, I heard dogs barking, but I didn't see anyone. And then it was snow, and I thought I would disappear, but Sonny found me. And how long have you known Sonny? Daisy smiled for the first time in court. Forever, even if it was just a little while. The room was still. Judge Carver nodded. Thank you, Ms. Daisy. You've been very brave. Later, in her final statement, the judge read off the charges: kidnapping, endangerment, possession of forged documents, obstruction of justice. Wade Monroe would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. A month passed. The snow began to melt along the southern roads of Edgepine, and beneath the ice, spring made quiet promises. In a newly renovated barn just outside town, Harper Lane unlocked the front doors to a place she had once only dreamed of opening: the Sunny Center for Child Recovery and Trust. The space was warm, filled with natural light and handmade quilts, books lined wooden shelves. The floor was padded and scattered with oversized beanbags, therapy toys, and sensory tools. Painted on the front wall was a mural, a golden field under a blue sky, with a large blind German shepherd standing tall at its center. Beneath the dog, in elegant script, were the words, "You don't need eyes to see love." Sonny lay just beneath the mural, his body relaxed, his blindfold freshly tied. Children began to arrive, some quiet, some loud, all broken in different ways, and they all found their way to Sonny. Some curled against him, others whispered their fears into his fur. A few, like Daisy, simply sat in silence beside him and let time stitch the wounds shut. Logan stood at the front desk, clipboard in hand. His posture was straighter now, his eyes clearer. He had decided not to leave town. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Hey," he said as Harper passed by. "We need more markers in room 2, and a replacement for that sensory blanket. Maddie's dog chewed a corner." "Got it," Harper said with a smile. "You're turning into quite the counselor." Logan shrugged. "I had a good teacher." Later that week, Harper sat by the mailbox outside the cabin, sorting through letters. One envelope caught her eye. Brown paper, no return address, just the name, June Lake. She froze. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. "I knew Hannah. I was there the night she ran. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't lying. He followed her across 3 states. When she disappeared, she made me promise to watch, and I did. Daisy's not just a case. She's a story that was never supposed to end. If you want the truth, I'll come. No phone number, no signature, just a time and a date. April 3rd, Edgepine Library, 10 a.m. Harper folded the letter slowly. Something in her chest stirred. Curiosity, yes, but also caution. The name Hannah matched the one Daisy had whispered once in sleep. She walked back inside, past the children playing, past Logan leading a breathing exercise for a new group, and knelt beside Sonny. He turned his head slowly toward her, as if sensing something unseen. "Looks like we're not done," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. That evening, Daisy sat beneath the tall pine tree near the edge of the center's play yard. The sky was soft pink, and the wind carried the smell of melted snow and new grass. She leaned against Sonny's side, her cheek resting on his fur. "Do you think Mama would like it here?" she asked. Sonny said nothing, but his body was warm, steady, real. "I think she would," Daisy whispered. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, the smile that touched her lips was not a memory, but something born from right now. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright lights. Sometimes they come as a blind dog who never stopped protecting, a little girl who found the courage to speak, or a brother who finally chose to heal. In a world that can often seem cold and broken, these quiet moments of love, trust, and redemption are proof that God still moves, softly, gently, through the hands and hearts of those who care. Just like Sonny didn't need eyes to see Daisy's pain, sometimes we are called to feel to listen, and to act, not because we see everything clearly, but because we believe in what's right. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment below and say, Amen, if you believe that even in the darkest forest, God can still send light. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and pray for children who are still waiting to be found. May God bless every soul watching this video, and may you always be the light someone else is waiting for.